Welcome, I'm Tom Morley from T3D. Today we'll start a series of tutorials on text creation in Blender 3D. This series on text creation will cover basic, intermediate, and advanced topics. We'll be using Blender 2.71 for this series. I've loaded Blender with all the default settings so it'll be easier for you to follow along. And I've also enabled screencast keys that you'll see here in the lower left. The first thing that we need to do is we need to delete the default cube. Right click on the cube to make sure that it's selected, press the delete key and press enter. Now we want to add some text. There's a couple of ways that we can do that. The first way is to hold the shift down and press A to bring up the add menu, and then left click on the text button. That's one way. Another way is to click on the create tab on the left hand side and go down to the text button and click on it there. So we're going to do that. You'll see it generated some text for us. Next we want to go into camera mode so that we can see what how the camera's lined up here in camera perspective mode. We see that the text is lying flat on the ground. We don't really want it flat, we want it facing the camera, so we're going to rotate it on the x-axis 90 degrees and press enter. We also see that the text seems to be left justified from the cursor. I'd like that probably centered. So how can we fix that? Well, we'll go over here and click on the font button to bring up all the different aspects of fonts that we can change. If we scroll down to paragraph, you'll see the alignment buttons. You'll see that left is highlighted. Left click on the center button and that'll line up the text the way that I want it. We also need to pan the camera in a little bit so that we get a little bit closer to the text. We can do that by holding down the shift key and pressing F. You can use the mouse to rotate the camera left, right, up, and down, and the arrow up and the arrow down keys to pan in and out. So we're going to use the arrow up, pan in a little bit, use the mouse to line it up in the viewport, and then click the left mouse button to lock it into place. We're going to go back to the font section. There's a couple of things I want to do. The text is going to be pretty boring if it's just flat. So one of the things that we want to do is extrude it, give it some thickness. So in the geometry section, if you left click on the extrude box, you can move the mouse left and right to extrude your text the amount that you want. Okay, probably that much is enough for now. We also want to add a bevel so that we can get as much glint light as we can off from this text. Okay, so we've extruded our text and we've also added a bevel. But this is just the default text that Blender created. What if I wanted my own text here? Well, down here right now we are in object mode. You can left click on that box and go into edit mode. You'll see it brings up a cursor. You can type just like any other text program. Use your backspace to delete what's already there, and let's put in our own text. We're going to left click on edit mode and go back into object mode so we don't accidentally type anything else in there. Another way to switch from object mode to edit mode is to hit the tab key. You hit the tab key, you go into edit mode, hit it again, and then you go back into object mode. So far so good. The text looks pretty nice. But we haven't added any material at all to the text. If you hit F12 to render it out, you're going to find a couple of things don't look right. One, the text is just a gray color, pretty boring, and it looks like our light is all messed up. And that's because of where the default scene for Blender places our lights. So we need to fix that. So I pressed escape to get out of the render mode, and I'm going to press number 3 on the numpad to go into right perspective mode. And you'll see our light way up here and up at the top of the screen. If you right click on the light and then click on the light button so that we can edit settings that pertain to the light, you're going to see a couple of things. You're going to see that the light is a point light. So that's why it's not rendering correctly as far as all the light seeming to be on the back of our object, and that's because the points is at the back of our object. So we're going to move that. We're going to press the G key to grab it and use the mouse to move it down behind the camera, and then we're going to press the left mouse button to lock it into place. So now if I press F12 to render it again, you're going to see that things look a little bit better. The lighting is hitting the front of the font, and we've got some nice shadows on the font as well. One thing that I have noticed that here is that, wow, those shadows are really sharp. So I'd like them to be, I guess, a little bit blurred. How can I do that? Well, that's all in your light settings. So let's press escape to get out of the render view. Press 0 to go back to the camera perspective. Now we still have the light highlighted, so if you click the light button, there's a couple of things we want to change in here. The energy of the light is how bright the light is going to be. We're going to change that to 2.50 for now. So we're going to make the light a little bit brighter. And if we remember correctly, when I rendered this out, the shadows were really harsh. We'd like to, I guess, blur those out or make them a little bit softer. And we can change that with the soft size box here. You see it's 0.1. We're going to change that to 4. We're going to go all the way up to 4 for that. We're also going to change the number of samples from 1 to 10. This is going to give us less banding as far as blurring the shadow out. And you're going to see that when I render it here. So I'm going to press F12 and render that scene again. Okay, and you see that we don't have that harsh shadow here on the fonts. It just seems to be a nice blended, blurred shadow, and that looks pretty nice. That will do for now. Press escape, go back to camera perspective mode, and now we're going to want to put some material on our font as well. So we're going to right click on our font to highlight it, and we're going to click on the material tab. We're going to create a new material. I'm going to make this font red. So for the diffuse, we're going to left click on the color and move the slider all the way down to the bottom of where the red color is. And for specular, white is fine, but we're going to change the details, I suppose, of the highlight on our objects. We're going to change that from the Couture setting to not Fong, yeah, to the Wordleso, if that's how you pronounce it, setting. That's going to give us a nice crisp highlight on our text. We're also going to bring the intensity up to about 0.7-ish. Now when we render this text out, you'll see that we're getting some really nice highlights here on the edge. Another thing is I want this to have some reflectivity, so we can again go to the materials section, expand the mirror area, turn the mirror on, bring reflectivity up to about 5, somewhere in that range, and you'll see that now we're getting some reflections for our material. But you'll also see that it's got this kind of bright white haze over it, almost like a ceramic feel to it. Now, I don't want that. I'm looking for more like a painted car reflection. So what we need to do is we need to tone that really harsh white reflectiveness down a little bit. And you can do that by clicking on the white color here under mirror and bringing that down to a gray color. Now when you look at it, you see it looks more like a painted texture. So now if I render that, it looks a little bit better. Okay. So it's looking pretty nice, but I think we need to add a backdrop of some sort to this so that the text stands out a little bit more. So we're going to exit out of the render view by hitting escape, back to perspective mode, and now I'm going to hold down the middle mouse button and rotate to the back side of the text, and then I'm going to left click anywhere on a flat part of the text. And what that's going to do is that's going to basically stick that cursor to the back side of our text. And that's important because of what I'm going to do next. We're going to add a wall, if you will, to the back side of our scene. So we can add a plane by pressing Shift A, bringing up the Add menu and clicking on the left clicking on plane, or we can also do it the same way as we did with the text. Click the Create tab and then click on the plane button, and that creates a nice plane for us. But again, it's not rotated correctly, so we're going to press R and then X 90 degrees and press Enter. And you'll see that plane is lined up nicely with the backside of our font. I'm going to press 0 to go back into camera perspective mode, and we see that our plane is not large enough, so we need to scale it up. We're going to press S for scale and then move the mouse to the right until it completely fills the field of view for the camera. Now if we press F12, you'll see that we get a much better output. Now we got something behind the text that can create some of the shadows for us. We're almost there. We're almost done with this beginner's tutorial. I'd like to add a material to the wall as well. So we have the wall selected. We're going to make sure we're in the materials area by clicking on the material, left clicking on the material button, and we're going to left click on the material button here, and we see that we've already created one material, so we're going to go down, left click, and then let go of the button to apply that red texture to our backdrop. Let's rename that red texture to red to avoid some confusion. Now the only object I have highlighted is the back plane or wall, if you will. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to add a new material, and when you hit the plus, it's going to basically copy the existing material on the plane. So I'm going to add a material. You see it named it red 001. We're going to rename that to brown. And now we need to change the color from red to brown. The wall doesn't need to be as reflective as the font itself, so we're going to go down to the mirror section, bring that down to about 2.92. And we're also, I forgot to add a little bit of Fresnel to the font, and I'll also add it to the wall. Well, what does that do? That kind of changes the amount of reflectivity on an object based on the angle of the light to the camera. Basically, it's just going to give you more realism in the reflection. So we're going to do about 1.6 for the wall. Now I'm going to right click on the font, select that, and for that Fresnel we're going to go up to about 1.8. Looks pretty good. Okay, now we're going to render that out and see how it looks. That looks pretty good. We could call this tutorial complete, but there's a couple of things we could do to kind of snazz it up a little bit. So let's do that. Let's click on the World button, and that brings up the world that these objects are basically sitting in. And let's create a sky. Blended sky, real sky. Let's change this to kind of a dark gray for the horizon, and the zenith color, let's bring that intensity up a little bit and make it kind of like a yellow reddish color, like almost a little bit of warmth, I suppose, to it. And what will happen is, now that we have blended sky, as that blended sky is going to reflect off from the fonts and the backgrounds a little bit, kind of add a little bit more realism to the scene. You'll see that when I render it out here. Yeah, that's looking pretty good. Pretty happy with that. So again, we could call this finished, but there's a couple of tricks that I'd like to show you before we end this tutorial, and that is, well, what if you don't want this really sharp bevel on your text? What if you wanted like a rounded edge on your font here? Is there a way that I can do that? And the answer is yes. So let's press Escape to get out of Render View and zoom in, and let's click on the Font button to get back to the aspects that we can change on the font. And in the geometry section where we change the depth of the bevel, if we want it to be rounded, then we can add more resolution to the edge, which basically rounds the edge out a little bit. So typically I'll bring that up to about 3 or 4, depending on what I want to see as far as the highlights. 4 looks pretty good. So I'm pretty happy with that. Let's press F12 and render that out. And yeah, look at that. That grabs so many more highlights of our off the edge of the fonts. That kind of just makes that text pop. It looks really nice. Now there's one more trick that I found, because really in real life, let's press Escape, go back to camera perspective mode. In real life, you're never going to find text that has this sharp 90-degree edge up here on the top, and the front face of the fonts are perfectly flat. You're just not going to see that in real life. So is there a way that I can put just a little bit of a curvature to the front faces of the text and smooth the top 90-degree edges of our fonts? Is there something that I can do to smooth that out? And the short answer is the short answer is no. There's no way to do that here in the font section that I know of. But I did find a little trick that I'm going to share with you now that gives you a much more realistic looking text object when you're done. Okay, so what we want to do here is we want to kind of remesh the text that we have here. So we're going to click on the modifier button. We're going to add a modifier, and that's a remesh modifier. And you'll see when I add that modifier, it looks like it messes everything all up. And well, why are you doing that? You'll see in a moment. But it did mess things up because this is highlighted here, remove disconnected pieces. So if I uncheck that, you'll see that I start to get all of my letters back, except for they really look horrible. And that's because I haven't added enough slices to the object to make it look like the font was originally. So we're going to increase the number of slices, so to speak, on our object by hitting this arrow with the left mouse button. And we're going to go up to about 9 for the Octo Depth. Okay, and you'll see that you got all kinds of nice sharp edges, and that's not really what I was looking for. I wanted it to be smooth. So change the mode from sharp to smooth, and you'll see that it created quite a few more slices to our font. But it's still a text object. Okay, this is still a Blender text object. All we've done is added a remesh modifier to it. So I can still go to the font menu, and I still could change some things on the font if I wanted to. I could you know, make it a little thicker by moving the extrude or the bevel depth. I could still do all of that stuff. But after this next step, it's no longer going to be a text object. It's going to be converted to a regular mesh, just like a cube or a sphere. But that's okay, because that's going to give us the look that I'm looking to perform. I want to get rid of these sharp edges. So now that I've got the modifier attached to our text object, I'm going to go down here to the object button down at the lower left hand side, click on that, and go up to convert to. And I'm going to basically convert this text object into a mesh. Mesh from curve, meta, surf, or text. And I'm going to click on that. And what just happened? Well, this object is now a mesh. It's no longer text. So you'll see that it's highlighted, but we can no longer go back to the font menu because it's no longer a font. You also notice that in the modifier section, it applied that remesh modifier when I converted this to a mesh object. And that's exactly what I wanted to have happen. So now we're going to change from object mode to edit mode. Again, I can do that by left clicking on object mode and then left clicking on edit mode, or I can just hit the tab key to go into edit mode. And you'll see I don't have any of the faces selected, so I'm going to press the A key to select all of the faces on my mesh. I'm going to left click on the tools tab, and then I'm going to go down to smooth vertex. This is where I'm going to smooth that text and get rid of that 90-degree angle that we saw at the top of some of the sides of our font. So I click that. It took a little while for that to smooth the first pass. And what you're going to want to do is click down here where it says number of times that I want to smooth the vertex, and you're going to change that to 20. I've already done this once, so it remembered that setting, and it already applied that smooth vertex 20 times to my object. But you're going to have to type in 20 here and press enter. After it does that, then you can press the tab again to go back into object mode. Okay, and now click on Smooth Shading over here in the tools to make sure that you've got your smoothness for your mesh object turned on. And now we're going to render that out. And this will be the final pass. You're going to see I just love the look of the font once you get rid of those crisp 90-degree angles on the top and side. Now that might be a look that you're going for, but if you want to get some text that looks like it was created in the real world, well, there you go. This little trick that I just showed you gives you that smooth non-90-degree angles on all aspects of your text. You know, you get that little smooth edge all over the place, and it allows you to get better reflections on the front surface of your text and on the sides as well. And that looks really good, and that's with the default fonts that come with Blender. In the tutorials later on, in the intermediate and advanced tutorials, I'm going to show you how to download some free fonts off the internet and how to bevel some of the fonts that are difficult because they weren't generated correctly. There's all kinds of tricks and tips coming up in the intermediate and advanced videos. So that's it for this video. I hope you learned something, and as always, feel free to leave me a comment, like or subscribe. This is my very first tutorial. I hope to do a lot more of them, so any of your comments will help me get better as I go along. So thank you for watching. Happy blending, and I hope to see you in the next video.